Let's see if that works. Okay, now we should be having sound.
What's happening?
Okay, let's see here. It is...
Yep,
Okay,
you're good now.
there we go. Sorry about that, Taylor. Stinking technology. Okay, let's see here. So back to the question of what to do if you live in a harsh biome and you don't have, or you live in a city where you don't have access, to a lot of wildlife and everything. The first thing is if you're living in a city, try to find a small park. You don't need a lot of things. Just some place where you can go and sit in the grass even. A lot of parks are big enough they have a tree. Lean against the tree. Other things is to just be aware of your surroundings and your natural habitats. One example that the ADF, a Druid Fellowship used to say is be aware of your watershed. Be aware of where your water comes from. Where the rain comes from. What rivers feed into the reservoirs. If you have city water in your city reservoir, where the runoff comes from, or what rivers feed into that. Things like that are just very good. The idea here, and I will be honest with you, this is a tough question for me because I don't use a lot of nature in my witchcraft. My witchcraft tends to be more devotional, honoring the deities, and it's one of those cases where I do tend to split away from a lot of the other places and other religious groups because I do not have that strong touch with nature. But if you're looking for connection with nature, do what you have in your area. Be aware of your area's natural habitats. And if that means that, your nature is, cactus and scorching sand, find ways to connect to that, do that as well. And the other thing I would say is don't forget that humans are a part of nature. You can find nature in a nightclub, with all the, energy and all of the people, dancing around. And, there's probably a lot of, sexual tension and energy in that sense. That's all energy that can be focused on and embraced. So that's all things to do. I'm going to circle back. Again, Taylor, you are welcome to ask your questions if you have any as they come up with. I will circle back and answer again the question that Joe asked earlier. He asked about advice for newbie witches. My advice there is always follow your instincts. I think the best thing that a newbie witch can do is learn to trust themselves and rely on their own intuition. So that is something that I strongly recommend. Now, one of the things that I will say there is that one good way to improve your intuition is to take up divination. So yes, one of the first things you might want to look to is some form of divination. Now, tarot is a very popular one, and it's a great form of divination. Personally, because of my Norse bent, I am very attracted to the runes. So the runes are another option. And then there are, other forms of divination, like, reading tea leaves and palmistry. I'm not very familiar with those or how they work that well, but, they are options. I used to have a coven member who did the I Ching a lot, and she really enjoyed that. And again, the idea here is to help develop your intuition. So, when you start doing divination, do divination about all kinds of things. And one of the things I will say about divination is that don't focus just on fortune telling, telling what the future is. Explore questions, explore ideas. I'll again mention what my Twitter friend Kiara says. They've been doing tarot, and they're actually very good at tarot. They look at tarot as sort of spicy psychology cards. They see the tarot as a way of exploring their own mind and their own psychology. And that is a valid and very useful way of using that tool. So I highly encourage that. Other things that you can do as a newbie witch is work on the basics like grounding and shielding and centering yourself so that you have that sense of who you are and your connection to the earth. Shielding yourself. This is very helpful for people who are receptive in any sort of psychic way, whether it be mediumship, whether it be being empathic or whatever. Being able to shield out the excesses of others, the things, the random noise that you don't want to experience, is a very useful tool and very helpful. So I highly recommend that as well. Energy work is another one, learning to sense and manipulate energy. When I was first starting out, I had a mentor who would have me create a ball of energy between my hands and work with it and get to the point where I could feel it and I could actually press against it and feel it pressing back, the response to that. They'd have me play catch with myself by taking the energy ball, forming it and throwing it in the corner and catching it again. And now y'all get to understand why when the sound wasn't working you saw all those funny hand motions, because I'm doing them again. So hopefully that will be helpful to you. Now you understand, oh, that's what the crazy person on the camera was doing, which is always a good thing. Okay, I think I've caught back up with all of the questions, so I'm open to more questions. So Taylor, Joe, did I miss one? Okay, you mentioned nature and animals. Speaking of animals, what kind of ways can one incorporate their loved animals and pets into their practices? That's a good question. It's something I don't have a lot of experience with, so I'm not sure how to answer that one. I think that one thing is you can do healing and protection for your animals. You can invite them into circle with you. That can get interesting. I know several of us have cats that do not seem to have the survival instinct to keep their noses and tails away from lit candles, so you obviously want to be careful about things like that. By the way, the kitty is sitting right next to me. She hasn't decided to put in an appearance yet, but she is right here. Animals, especially cats, do seem to be attracted to magical work. I remember reading, I forget what source it is, one source I read said that that's because cats are actually, their brain waves never leave a meditative state. They're constantly in a meditative state. So they tend to be attracted towards the energy that goes on in like an open ritual or any sort of magical working that you are doing. So be sensitive to that. Sadly, that's the best answer I have. I'm not, like I said, I've never had an animal that I would consider a familiar. So, and personally, I think that word gets tossed around a little too easily at times, but hopefully that will be helpful, and I'd love to hear some of your ideas if any of you have any ideas when you're watching this video later. Okay, I think Joe is working on our next question. So, and again, Taylor and anyone else who pops in, I encourage you to ask questions. Really, the sky is the limit. I will take personal questions. I will moderate personal questions, though. I'm not going to, as I said earlier, but you probably didn't hear, I'm not going to go into the deep details of our sex life or anything like that. There are limits to what I'm willing to share on a public forum, but, I am willing to talk about lots of things, and especially like my personal practice, I'm willing to go into that. My relationship with Freya, my own understanding of, Save, which, for those not familiar, is a very specific type of Norse witchcraft that we do. Okay, Joe, let's say you want to incorporate your cat into practices. Could you spend time doing something with them that could feel like a ritual, like taking your dog for a walk? Oh, yes, absolutely. That is a very good idea, and thank you, Joe. Yes, this gets into something else that I talk about, that the dividing line between the mundane and the magical, or the sacred even, is illusory. I take very seriously that statement in the Charge of the Goddess that says that, all acts of love and pleasure are my ritual. Spoken by the Wiccan goddess. I'm not Wiccan, but I think some Wiccans said some very smart things. And I am very serious about that. That, literally any act of love and pleasure, anything that brings love or shows your love, can be an act of ritual and can be seen as an act of ritual. And from my viewpoint, this is where I will say, and this kind of, might upset some people, but I think it's true, is that, witchcraft is a matter of perspective. And a witch with the proper perspective is a witch in doing witchcraft 100% of the time. Except maybe when they're sleeping. But even that, if you're intentionally going to sleep, that sleep, you're intentionally rejuvenating yourself. So yeah, I'd say even then, yeah, you're practicing witchcraft. It's just a very sedentary, very somnolent form of witchcraft. Yes, very true. If you feel some kind of way about something that happened, then there was probably a magical exchange of some level. I totally agree with that. Um, I always go back, and this goes back to what I was saying. I go back to Crowley's definition of magic, which can be summed up as magic is the art and science of affecting change in accordance with one's will. And I know a lot of people try to clarify that by saying it's through means not understood by science, or things like that. And honestly, I disagree with that addition. I think that Crowley, who I can criticize about a number of things, well, not a lot of things. I don't know a lot about Crowley, to be honest. Just what I've learned from people who have studied him much more in depth. But I think he's worthy of some criticisms in some things, and he certainly was a wild man who did some very questionable things that I would not recommend repeating or emulating. I think he got his definition of magic right the first time, and it goes back to that idea that any willful act, any intentional act that is designed to cause change is, an act of magic. So to me, doing, lighting candles to help you find a job is no more magical, and every bit as magical as, dusting off your resume and polishing it up so that it looks better and gets you more attention. And both of those things are very magical acts and deserve to be given the same level of focus and attention. Because if you don't, if you do the candle magic and then just never send out your resume, you're sending the universe mixed messages. You're saying, yeah, I want this, but not really. So, and the universe says, well, if you're not really that seriously committed, why don't you do that? Of course, you got to be careful with that. Don't get into victim blaming. Sometimes, and I did a video on that called "The Limitations of Magic." Some things you just can't magic into existence. Sometimes, the world is against you, or it's just beyond, your magical power. We're not, gods or, Sith lords with unlimited power. Yes, I had to get the Star Wars reference in there because that's my nature. So I think that covered that question fairly well. I think Joe is working on another one.
Trying to. Messing with my
Huh?
Here we go.
Okay. So let's see here. Unless your job is to pour wax in your naughty customers,
On your number.
on your naughty customers.
Yeah, because you said about you don't have to light a candle and feel any way about it.
Okay, a little bit of kink humor there for my followers. Hopefully you all enjoy this. Okay. These have been some really good questions, babe.
Told you.
So, just waiting for a few more questions to come in if you have any. Feel free. Okay, now to put you on the spot. Ever thought about having a live right on your channel? I have not. That would be very difficult do without some more equipment, I think. I would consider it. I have very mixed feelings about that. I tend to look at it that, that rights tend to be very private unless they're designed to be public. So I would actually have to look into how to make a public right that I would want to do on my channel and share on my channel. I also tend not to do rights just for the heck of doing rights, but I suppose I could think of doing, just a general healing rite or something like that, or even just a rite to honor, my deities. So it's something we could look into in the future. It's something that, we'd have to work out some details because, like I said, right now I'm doing this with a webcam and a USB mic, and I don't really have the equipment to, hook up a separate camera or something like that to do the streaming. I wish I did. So we'd have to figure out how would we get the right into the camera and whatnot. And so that could be challenging. I'm not saying no, but it's definitely something that I would consider in the future. Thank you, Taylor. I see your message. I'll read it for the others. I don't have any specific questions, but I appreciate your answers to the questions there have been. Looks like you were going to say more, but it got cut off or something. I will give you a little bit of time to finish your thought if you have more thoughts. Wow, we actually got up to 6 views somehow. Although currently we only have 2 concurrent viewers. So hopefully things will pick back up and people will show up again. You got another question coming, babe?
I do.
Okay. No problem. Take your time. While you're doing that, I am going to go ahead and do a real quick to let people know that we got things fixed on Twitter. So yeah, okay, I am back now. Close that back out. Last one Joe has for now, and probably the hardest one yet. What do you feel is going to be your next steps in your practice? Also, any sneak peeks for what's next? That is a very good question. I'm actually trying to get back into reading right now. I have a wonderful book by Thorne Mooney that is about going to the next step, and it's about revitalizing your practice, and I want to get back into reading that. There is a part of me that really does feel that it's time for me to get more community focused and more teaching focused. I do want to get back into teaching. Yes, I will teach you. I can see you over there grinning ear to ear. I saw the thumbs up too. So yes, it's going to be a challenge for me because, I've learned how to do things, and now it's a case of, okay, how do I teach those things to other people, and what do I teach to other people? My practice is very eclectic, but I've built it around certain things. So those are the things that I probably will end up teaching because it's what I'm familiar with. And so that's going to be the other challenge is finding a student or a couple of students who are interested in the specific things that I have to teach because, witchcraft is a very, very, wide and diverse practice. There's a number of different practices. It's more, when you talk about witchcraft, you really should be talking about witchcrafts because, my practice is very different from, I will mention her from Twitter, Rhea. I've mentioned Thorne Mooney. I will mention my friend Yvonne Abero, who they are a Gardnerian witch. They are also non-binary, so their practice is very different from the Gardnerian practice that Gardner started out with and showed the world. So things are very different. And, of course, there's all kinds of other practices. So, there's a lot of things that can go on there that, we, so it's a case of, there's a lot of different practices. So, my potential students and mentees have to be interested in what I have to teach. And if you're not interested in what I have to teach, that's perfectly fine. You're not required to be interested in what I am. Give me a second while I take a drink here. Okay. Joe has a comment. Almost seems to me like you could have a set curriculum for people so that even people that are not going to get into the practice to have a chance to understand and learn more of the crafts. Yeah, I'll have to think about that. I'll have to think about that. I always run into this thing where I try not to talk out of my butt too much, and I also try not to talk over people. So I'm always, doing the whole thing of, okay, am I offering something unique? Am I offering something that, you can't get on just, from a number of books or a number of websites? So that's one of the things that I need to focus on is that, okay, what do I think the core curriculum, and what is my take on it that I think I can offer that, other people might not, be aware of or be exposed to, that they might find helpful, because I do want to do that sort of thing. Okay, I don't want to cut things off right now, so I am going to give a little bit of my background again, because I'm guessing that got cut off too. So, butt words. That's my hubby, folks. So a bit about my background. I started getting into witchcraft and pagan spirituality back in November of 1998. I won't go into the details, but basically, short story is I was an evangelical Christian before that. For the most time, I spent the last 2 years of my Christian life as a queer affirming Christian, or at least gay affirming Christians. I'm not sure how I felt about trans people at the time. My own understanding of the queer community and its diverse needs have grown over the years. So I will note that I still had a lot to learn even back then. So, and I still have a lot to learn now. But I made the change, and I started out by reading Cunningham's Guide for the Solitary Practitioner, and a number of other books on eclectic Wicca. It really didn't fit for me. So I ended up exploring a couple of Reconstructionist groups. I started off with ADF, a Druid Fellowship, or Arn Reacht Fane. That is a Druid organization that was founded by Isaac Bonowitz. I forget when he founded that, but yeah, that was founded. So I learned from them, and I started their Dedicants program, and that's where I learned about the concept of patronage, which I find interesting, by the way, because Ian Corrigan, who wrote a lot of the ADF Dedicants program, has kind of backed away from the patronage program since then, and feels that he overemphasized that when he was putting the Dedicants program together. So that was kind of interesting. Then, because I started out doing runes, I had a friend who realized that my soul just lit up when I talked about the runes in Norse mythology. So he convinced me to pursue a relationship with the Norse deities. So I ended up joining the Troth, which was originally founded by Idrid Thorson. When I joined it, Diana Paxson was actually the steerswoman, so I learned from them. And I actually got to meet a number of these people the year that I went to Starwood. I went to Starwood for a few days and got to meet some of these people, so that was awesome. And I got to take their workshops, so that was fun. I eventually left the Troth because I was not a Reconstructionist. Reconstructionists like to argue over the lore and the proper interpretation of the lore a lot, and which is kind of interesting. I wonder if I'd find it more interesting. Since then, I've also talked to a lot of Jews, and I've gotten a greater appreciation for the way that Jews argue over Torah and the Tanakh, and how they explore that. And I wonder if I went back and took that same kind of mentality toward the lore of the Norse and other Northern European countries, how I might feel differently about arguing over that material now. It might be something I might explore at some point, but I don't know. But eventually I did leave. I started focusing on Freya, and I did come back to Wicca briefly, specifically, initiatory traditions of Wicca. Specifically, I looked at the Minoan Brotherhood and the Alexandrian tradition. Even talked to a couple of, people who would have been able to initiate me in those traditions, and, talked about, becoming their pupils and, training towards initiation. That didn't pan out for a number of reasons. Bad timing, I think, mostly. That, and I just, at the time, I was still scared and wasn't ready to make that kind of commitment, because that is a lot of commitment. So there is that. So that's kind of my background. So you know who this guy babbling in front of the camera is, and why I say the things that I do. And something going on, babe?
There was for a second, but
Okay. But yeah.
coming up on 40 minutes.
Yeah. Well, and it looks like we've run out of questions. So, assuming there are no further questions, I am probably going to cut it off here, because I feel like I'm rambling now, and I don't like it when I feel like I'm rambling. I do hope that you have enjoyed this. Those of you who have stopped in, I hope that those of you who watch the recording of this enjoy it. I will do another one of these at some point. Hopefully we'll get a few more people, and hopefully people get an idea of the kind of questions I'm willing to answer. And Joe actually asked some pretty thorough questions. You don't have to be, quite as deep as he is. You can ask, simple questions. I mean, they're silly questions like, what color candle do I use for this spell? Yes, I will give that kind of information. I don't usually, talk, the practicalities of spell work, mainly because, again, that stuff you can find anywhere. But, I will gladly, answer simple questions, and, and as I said in a video that I put out last week, even if your question seems silly, there's probably something in it that can be explored. I gave the example of, teenagers who watched, the first Craft movie and wanted, the spell to, how to change their hair color or how to change their eye color with magic, which, to my knowledge, no one can do. If someone wants to demonstrate that they can do it, yeah, we'll set up a date or something, and you can show me how you did it. But there is a real need being expressed there. Oh, looks like we just had someone show up. There is a real need being expressed there. So I do want to acknowledge that need and go ahead and, explore that need. So even if your question seems silly, there may be something worth exploring about, okay, well, why would you ask this question? What's behind this question? Is there something deeper that we can explore? So, and I will gladly do that. And okay, looks like everybody just left. So I will probably wrap it up here. Thank you for coming, everyone. Blessed be.